Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into a seriously chilling explainer. We are going to conduct a deep dive paranormal investigation into the fascinating and frankly terrifying source story known as Dak Gar, which translates to the post office. I really want you to lower the lights for this one because we're stepping into a narrative absolutely packed with betrayal, supernatural revenge, and a mystery that will for sure keep you on the edge of your seat. All right, let's get into it. Picture this. Would you dare spend a single night in a post office where literally no one survives until morning? I want you to put yourself in the shoes of our main subject, a guy named Mahesh. He's the newly appointed postmaster, the local Dak Babu. He's walking through a dense, pitch-black jungle path with just a letter in his hand, trying to find his new workplace. He has absolutely no idea about the life-or-death stakes of the building he's walking into. I mean, the villagers are acting incredibly weird around him. The local tea vendor is just absolutely shocked to see him alive the next morning, and he casually drops the bomb that every single postmaster who comes here either runs away the very next day or simply doesn't survive the night. All right, Section 1, Mystery of the Cursed Post Office. So let's set the scene here and analyze exactly what Mahesh was walking into on day one. Mahesh arrives at this old, super isolated post office surrounded by miles of dense jungle. Now, he's a highly logical guy, he's brave, and he's just ready to do his job. But you have to contrast that with his newly assigned assistant, Raju, who greets him outside. Raju is in a state of absolute fleeing terror. He flat out refuses to stay the night, telling Mahesh he would literally rather be fired from his job than spend a single second inside that building after dark. Raju's panic acts as a massive, glaring red flag, one that Mahesh's highly logical mind initially just brushes off as the quirks of an older, superstitious man. Well, Mahesh's logic gets put to the ultimate test on night one. The source material lays out some very specific, super eerie clues here. Around midnight, Mahesh is just trying to read a book, but he's interrupted by this terrifying sequence of sounds. First, it's the howling of jackals, which, okay, he tries to dismiss as normal jungle noise. Then comes the sudden, aggressive barking of wild dogs. But then it gets deeply unnatural. He hears heavy breathing right outside his door, followed by the distinctive, rhythmic ringing of a bicycle bell and the creak of pedals turning. These aren't just random, spooky jump scares to build atmosphere. As we'll see, these sounds are the specific calling cards of the entity that's haunting the Dak Gar. Moving on to Section 2, Terrifying Letters and Deaths. This is where things escalate from just a creepy atmosphere to actual escalating danger. The entity has a deadly MO, and it builds incredibly fast. Night 1, as we know, Mosh barely survives and gets zero sleep. But on night 2, a villager named Vipul, a guy who is desperate for cash to take his wife on a trip, gets a mysterious letter. It promises him 5,000 rupees for a one-day job, provided he comes to the banyan tree behind the post office at 1 a.m. Vipul actually goes, and he is brutally killed. Then, on night 3, the attacks ramp up even more. The village head's daughter, Nupur, and her husband, Baldev, are targeted and killed in that exact same spot. And get this, the entity doesn't just attack out of nowhere. It leaves a terrifying warning. The letter left on the ground for Nupur and Baldev read, "Your punishment for your sins is coming. The crime you committed to hide the truth is now going to come out." The entity cleverly uses letters, which makes total sense for a haunted post office, right? To bait its victims. It preys on Vipul's greed for money, and it exploits Baldev and Nupur's hidden guilt over their past sins, just to lure them out into that dark, isolated jungle. So, if we look closely, a terrifying pattern emerges. It always starts with a mysterious letter delivered right to the victim's door in the dead of night, demanding a midnight meeting, specifically at that banyan tree behind the post office. As the victim waits there, in the dark, they hear the approaching sound of that exact same cycle bell Mahesh heard on night 1. And finally, a pack of barking dogs chase them down right before a shadowy figure on a bicycle launches a brutal, fatal attack. That cycle bell? It's basically the ultimate harbinger of death for the corrupt villagers in this story. Now for Section 3, Aryaman's painful story. Mahesh eventually finds Nupur and Baldev's bodies, and right alongside them, he finds a letter addressed specifically to him. This letter reveals the tragic lore behind the village's very first postmaster. So according to the village head, who they call the Mukhya, this whole haunting is tied to a man named Aryaman. Aryaman was a local success story. He was raised by a hardworking widowed mother, he studied his heart out, and he became the village's first postmaster. But his story ended in absolute tragedy. His body was found in the jungle in a really gruesome state. The official story, pushed by the powerful Mukia, was that Aryaman was just attacked and torn apart by a wild, bloodthirsty animal. But of course, this official story perfectly masks the true crime that triggered the haunting in the first place. But wow, the letter Mahesh finds drops a massive plot twist. It's a heartfelt, yet incredibly gruesome confession letter written directly by Aryaman's ghost. Aryaman explains that he was incredibly happy being the postmaster. He had saved up his salary for years and even sold his ancestral land for one specific dream. He wanted to buy the biggest house in the village for his mother to live in, and he was buying that house directly from the Mukia. The entire village was fed this convenient public lie about a random, tragic animal attack. But the truth? Actually, it's so much darker. It was cold-blooded betrayal. Aryaman went to the post office at night to hand over the cash to the Mukia, who brought along Vipul and his son-in-law, Baldev, to help count the money. But instead of signing the property papers, the Mukia signals Vipul, who strikes Aryaman over the head with a heavy stick. The Mukia wanted to keep that house for his daughter, Nupur, and just steal Aryaman's life savings to maintain his status as the richest man in the village. They threw Aryaman's body under the banyan tree. It's like a giant puzzle, and suddenly, all the pieces just snap together. This is exactly why Vipul, Nupur, and Baldev were targeted. It was a highly calculated act of supernatural revenge. Which brings us to Section 4, Exposing the Mukia. Once Mahesh learns the truth, he completely shifts gears. He goes from being this terrified victim hiding in his room to a full-on active investigator determined to set a trap. He executes this absolutely brilliant sting operation. First, he confidently marches right up to the Mukia and invites him to the post office that night. He totally plays on the Mukia's guilt and superstition, lying and saying he's hired a tantric, a supernatural expert, to capture and banish Aryaman's ghost forever. The Mukia, desperate to hide his crime, eagerly agrees, thinking all his problems are finally solved. Meanwhile, Mahesh is secretly coordinating with a local police officer, the Kotwal, instructing him to hide in the shadows at the post office and just listen to everything. And the climax here is just incredibly satisfying, perfectly blending supernatural and legal justice. The Mukia arrives, waiting for the tantric to do his thing, but instead, that terrifying cycle bell rings. Aryaman's ghost appears right in front of them. The Mukia is absolutely paralyzed with fear. In a total panic, he confesses out loud, begging Mahesh for help and admitting he murdered Aryaman. Right on cue, the Kotwal steps out from the shadows, declaring he's heard the entire confession and places the Mukia under arrest. But, the ghost isn't quite finished yet. In a shocking display of power, the entity lifts the terrified Mukia high into the air and drops him to his doom. And that brings us to the resolution of today's explainer. Justice is finally truly served. With the Mukia's crimes exposed by Mahesh and corroborated by the police, the authorities ensure that Aryaman's grieving mother is officially handed the keys to that large house her son died trying to buy for her. Mahesh stays on as the postmaster, doing his job well. But the nature of the haunting fundamentally changes. He still hears that cycle bell at night, but he isn't afraid anymore. The horror story turns into this beautiful tale of peace and closure, as Mahesh realizes the bell is just Aryaman's spirit, stopping by to say a gentle thank you. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought, a question directly inspired by the core themes of the story. Does every crime get settled in this world? Daghar explores that deep human anxiety we all have, that those who commit terrible, greedy sins might just get away with it if they have enough power and influence. But it also offers this dark, supernatural hope that karma, one way or another, even from beyond the grave, will always come to collect its debts. Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis, and keep questioning what hides in the shadows.